Trystie's Quest, or Kit, King of the Pigwidgeons. By Greville MacDonald. Chapter 8. Thistledown and Moonshine, the Fairy Boat Race. Trystie sets out upon her quest. I should have mentioned that while I was examining the squirrel when Davy first brought it in, Trystie had been a very intent watcher. It was never her way to speak much, unless telling the children fairy stories, when her eyes would be gently closed, as though she were in quite another world. Davy and I, as I have said, took the little creature to the tool shed and fitted up its bed, so that Trystie and Robin were left alone with the mother. "I wonder, Robin," said the latter as she cut and spread the honey bread for tea, "whether he will get well again." "He's broke his leg, I know," replied the little boy, "'cause he wants Davy to have him. I saw him wunk too." "But perhaps squirrels mean something quite different when they wink," argued his mother, "who knows? I wonder what Trystie thinks." Our big girl thought for a minute, till she had filled 3 of the willow pattern mugs with milk. Then she shut her eyes, as if looking ahead beyond things, and said merely, "It looked like a fairy squirrel. If he is, he'll get quite well and go back for more cherries. Then some day he'll come and talk to Davy." Then Davy and I came in, and I cut the little slice of bread for the squirrel and Davy fetched the cherries. Then we both took them back to the shed. Davy also, as I have said, had to tie up the Prussian cat, as the people call our soft and sly Persian tabby. That same evening we were all happy again because Kit was wide awake and Robin's toothache forgotten. When the children were all abed, Kit, as I have said, again in his mother's, the mother sat down to her spinning and told Trystie all about the wonderful moonlight and the pretty doings on the dew pond. This child who came to us when she was 11 years old, instead of no age at all as is the ordinary way with children, is such a companion to the mother, that sometimes, as I sit with them tired after my day's work, and perhaps whittling away at a wooden spoon or carving a bowl, I wonder which is really the older Trystie, so wise and maidenly mother-like, or the mother so light-hearted and young when things are going well with the children and me. "Wasn't it rather dangerous, Trystie?" I asked in mock-serious tone, "catching one of their ships? I only wish I could have caught them all, and stopped their seeding all over our fields. I'd risk making the fairies angry." "I don't think the fairies are ever made angry," she replied, as if taking me seriously, "unless you want to be unkind. Don't you see, father, you only thought it was only thistledown." "But so it was, Trystie," expostulated the mother playfully. Then Trystie shut her eyes, looked ahead beyond things, and thrust her head a trifle forwards, as if it must follow her eyes. After a moment's silence, she said in a sort of thinking way, and as if rather to herself than to us, But, was there ever in all the world any such thing as only thistledown, or only anything else? I wonder." When the mother, a minute or 2 later, went to fetch Prince Tom Tit, who had started crying, she gave Trystie a good hug in passing. She knew what the child was thinking, that everything beautiful always means to everybody who loves it so very much more than can be seen. Yet not everybody knows that thistledown may be fairy fleets on a dew pond or flocks of fairy sheep on the windy downs, as well as dandelion chicks that have bidden goodbye to their mother before they are even hatched. The mother quickly returned with the baby. With him she brought also a little gay, old-fashioned bag purse made of beads, with pink and silver roses sprawling all over a pale blue ground. It had belonged to her grandmother, and was greatly admired by the children, who thought it must be magical. The mother gave it to Trystie. "For your very own," she said. "It's the sort of purse to carry fairy money in, I'm sure, and you can begin by putting your lucky sixpence in it." The child's delight in the lovely possession was too much for words. As the mother sat down on the creepy stool close to me and rocked the baby to sleep again, Trystie took the spinning wheel and the purse to the window where the cooler night air was sweet after the sunny day. But she did no spinning unless, indeed, the moon was her distaff, the silvery light her flax, and the gay little purse her spindle, for she turned the bead-woven flowers round and round to see their magic glitter in the moon's rays, and then, with a length of thread from the real spindle, she fastened the purse round her neck and hid it inside her frock. Meantime the mother sang this little song, the sort of thing that would often come to her unbidden when a baby needed rocking. "Oh, the wind and the moon, and the thistledown flying. The nightingales sing though the mothers be sighing. The dew pond is changed to a fairy sea, and there's ships and there's sailors for baby and me. Oh, the moon on the downs and the wind all blowing. Sweet dreams on the lamb's gentle sleep is bestowing. The dew pond is changed to a billowy sea, and home is the haven for baby and me. It was clear that a feeling of mystery and loveliness was in possession of us all that shining night, so peaceful with deep dreaminess. We sat a little longer without more words than such as are never spoken, and then went to bed. As I have said, that night I was to sleep again on the roomy old couch, the family coach, Kit called it, in the parlour. The casements were open on two sides, and the wind blew across me in gentle puffs of sweetness that seemed to insist upon play rather than sleep. At any rate, I did not want to close my eyes. Life was so good that it needed some thinking about. The thoughts that came to me were worth cherishing, for they were all about my dear ones upstairs. I was imagining how their souls lay fast asleep, while their good hearts, never resting, were at work all through the night like devoted brownies taking all responsibility. I was thinking such and many other thoughts when I heard the latch of the heavy old door that opens into the porch. The noise was so slight that I thought I must be mistaken. Yet I looked into the garden and saw, slowly walking down the brick path, a white figure, with long straight black hair streaming down her back. It was Trystie, and nothing on but her nightgown. I did not call after her, not wishing to make any noise that would awaken the children. But I was up in a moment, got into my clothes and took my crook from its nail in the porch. I watched the child as she crossed the road and ran up the side of the field opposite where the wheat was already swelling into full, strong ears. She went so straight ahead, looking neither to right nor left, that I felt sure she was fast asleep. Before I got near her she was halfway up the beech coombe which starts from the wheat field and quickly ascends by a steep winding path, we call it a bostel, onto the downs. I was puzzled as to what I should do. I feared to wake the child by calling, and so, till I realized what she would be doing, was content to follow close behind. I had no fear of her taking cold, so warm was the night, so thick was her hair, and so strong and hardy was her constitution. The further up we went, the faster the child sped, till, reaching the soft turf, she seemed to fly like a bit of thistledown itself, scudding before the wind. Indeed, I could not follow her close enough to keep her in sight. She disappeared at last behind a little knoll covered with gorse, whitethorn, and bracken. Then, as she still went uphill, I caught sight of her standing for a moment on the skyline. With the moon to the north of her, she looked extraordinarily silvery and sylph-like against the sky, and her black hair was now blowing all about her like an aureole of shadows and thunder clouds. Then she disappeared again. But I felt quite sure she was making for the dewpond we had been talking about. Thither I followed. When I reached her, she was sitting near the edge of it, by the side of a little thicket of gorse and bramble. Against the thicket had been driven by the wind a deep and high, shimmering mass of thistledown, the whole continually swaying to and fro as if in excited expectancy. Individual pieces would constantly break away, some flying off in the wind, some embarking upon the little pond. Trystie sat and seemed to watch, though I now saw that her eyes were closed. Still uncertain what I ought to do, I stretched myself out a few paces away from her, with face resting in my hand and elbow planted on the turf. I watched the child and the thistledown. Then things began not to change, but to develop. I saw more than had appeared the night before. The water itself was magic in its transparency. There was a little island in the center of the pond, which I had not seen before. It was wonderfully green, and clearly inhabited. Its outline was irregular with promontories and island offshoots. It presented a hilly country, thickly dotted with irregular caves, out of which peeped all kinds of birds, thrushes, tits, blackbirds, woodlarks, turtle doves, and even nightingales, those shyest of all birds. They all seemed to be on the lookout for friends, and their beaks were pointing towards our end of the lake, where great numbers of fairy-winged people were gathered together. As I looked intently into the transparent water, because the caves seemed to go beneath the surface, I saw right down to the bottom of the lake or sea. Presently I saw 10 silvery boats in full oar and sail start together from the mainland. They were manned by the most exquisite winged people. These were so light of foot that they barely touched their decks. Often they would hover overboard to dip their toes in the spray-scattering waves, and then fly back again to trim a sail, or put down the helm for tacking. It was a race, but such a happy one that nobody seemed to care who won, so long as some one of them did. And they were in real earnest too. If one ship fell behind, little sailors would fly across to it from all the others, some would lay hold of her bulwarks to help her onwards, some would crowd behind, and, puffing their cheeks out, looked as if they were blowing the ship along. but they appeared hardly to succeed, and were soon back again in their own ships. These were of all kinds and builds. Cutters, schooners, and full-rigged ships, Spanish galleons, gorgeous with colour and gold, Norse dragon-headed fighting galleys, Malay proas, Ceylon catamarans, Chinese junks, Venetian gondolas, and little ancient British coracles. Those without sails travelled quite as fast as the full-rigged ships. It was a long though merry race, perhaps 3 miles, though I had not thought the little dew-pond could have been so long. As Trystie learned afterwards, the race was for one prize only, namely the happiness of being first to tell the Queen that her godchild was coming home in one of the fairy fleet she had sent to fetch her. It is not easy to make these things intelligible to people who have not the fairy sense. To those who have, they are quite simple, because they know that when once a person has had dealings with the fairies, size and distance and time and right side up are no longer the only points of importance. To fairer sensible people whose heads are not hindside before, it is obvious that in Fairyland a giant can creep through a mousel when someone shows him the way, just as easily as the Queen of them all showers love and blessing over the whole world from the deck of a fairy ship made of thistledown and moonshine. It all depends upon how you look at things, not upon how things look to you. Well, the truth must be told, even when it seems impossible to believe it. As I lay on the turf by the side of this windswept, wave-tossing sea, I saw Trystie get up, looking so happy and merry, and run down to the bay where all that fairy crowd was waiting and watching the race. Her nightgown was like silver, and it shone through the black cloak of her beautiful hair. Her feet hardly touched the ground, though they ran with great dancing strides. Oh, she laughed merrily, you may be sure, as all the people came crowding about her. Then I saw the little fairy seaport beyond where she stood. The quays were built of blocks of pearly stone, strong with age and worn with use, with golden rings to which fairy ships were made fast, and capstans of black wood and silver fittings, and coils of silvery cord and piles of red nets, and old blocks and green copper anchors all lying about. Round the quay and the harbour stood ancient fairy houses, so homelike and staid, with their high-pitched roofs dotted with dormer windows, with their many overhanging, strong-beamed stories, with their windows all open like outstretched, welcoming arms to tempt the moonlight in and let out the downy people who were flying about quite at home and busy about highly important affairs. Presently out of this peaceful harbour was towed by little feathery boats, each manned by a bird-like rower who feathered his oars most perfectly, of course, the finest and jauntiest rowship you ever saw. It was brought into the deep water, by the side of which Trystie was still laughing and chatting with the others. Trystie just stepped aboard, and sat down upon the one low seat on the poop. Then the rowers seized their oars and the sails were unfurled. They were all the colours of the rainbow and quite as bright as if in the sunlight. As the distance increased I heard the sailors singing, "Farewell and adieu to you, Thistledown Haven, farewell and adieu to you, fairies so gay. For we've orders to sail in the silvery moonlight, but we'll meet you again next midsummer day. We'll rant and we'll roar like true fairy sailors, we'll rant and we'll roar on all the salt seas. From downland to elfland is 1,000 full leagues, but you're there, heave away, in a capful of breeze. Then heave away, ho, my jolly boy sailors. Overboard, over, with parsons and tailors. Heave away, hearties. And weigh your gold anchor, close haul the square sails and up with the spanker. We'll rant and we'll roar like rollicking sailors, we'll rant and we'll roar like ghosts in the shroud. Then, ho, for the harbour where frolicsome pixies will beckon and chase us in thistledown crowd." The singing and the splashing of the oars died away in the distance, till at last I saw the ship stop at the island in the middle of the lake. Then the moon was swallowed up by a monster black cloud and I saw no more. End of this chapter.